Hi, I'm Brenda Jones, and I'm here at Artwork Center for Contemporary Arts in Loveland, Colorado, and I'm excited to be in this space and be able to show um, the recent body of work that I am kind of immersed in, especially during this COVID time. Um, I live actually in South Fork, Colorado, and maintain my own studio there, which is very close to Wolf Creek Ski Resort in Creek, Colorado. So I've lived off and on in the Denver metro area, in Boulder, and in Kansas. So now I'm there and get to show my work here, and I'm real excited to be in this really beautiful space and to see all of the work kind of out in an open space. So this particular body of work deals with a lot of women's issues, sort of what it was like to grow up for me in the 1960s and a little bit later, and what people said I could do when I was in high school and what the expectation was for women, which to me kind of seemed like at the time it was secretary, which I was no good at shorthand, or nurse, which was totally out of the question, or teacher, and there were obviously other options, but those were the things that were kind of emphasized. And I would say that if anyone is interested, the rain boots that are in this exhibit in particular deal with that. That might be the starting point of this body of work. Because they sort of focus on images from those early 50s, 60s textbooks of Dick and Jane and Tip and Mitten. And if you look at the back of them, they say things like boys will be boys, or someday your prince will come, and things like that, but take some of the imagery from that time period. And then I've just sort of immersed myself in thinking about layers of what it means to be a woman in today's world built on that past world. And this particular body of work, interestingly, there's a piece here. She Knows Her Bones. It's over in the corner, that kind of came out from of me walking my dog, who's a big German Shepherd, and he found these bones out in the forest when we were walking, and I took some pictures of them and sent them to a friend. So I'm going to give a little plug to Caroline here. I sent them to Caroline's grandma, and she showed them to Caroline, and Caroline said what kind of bones they were, and we wondered why she knew what they were, and because she's in 4th grade, 5th grade, and she said, well, I know my bones. And it just started me thinking, well, I know my heart, I know my fishing lures. And I looked up different things like that. Interestingly, there's a phrase that says, she knows your onions, which I've never heard of before. So there's a dress about onions here, which means you know what you're talking about. So I just looked at different ways that I could put that in a dress. I have been working in ceramics and clay for a really long time, obviously, out of college. And at that point, it kind of seemed like I was going down the real decorative route with creating things in clay, which I love. I absolutely love it. But I was surrounded by people who were more into big, gutsy kinds of things, and it sort of seemed like at that time in the ceramic studio, in that ceramics world, that it was expected to go big, to go gutsy, to go minimalist, and if you aren't going to do that, then you're over there kind of out of the realm of ceramics. And it didn't really bother me a whole lot, but that was coupled with thinking about, how am I going to do a studio? I'm still in my 20s in college, and I might be moving here, I might be moving there. And I kind of went to the direction of fibers and sewing. So I made giant aprons for a while that were 12 feet tall, and handmade paper and purchased paper. Then I put encaustic on it and embroidered them, and in particular, I started with one that was a lot of used coffee filters, and then embroidered onto them things like things like, can't remember some of the words right now, caught, subjected, a lot of things like that, and then sewed the coffee filters together and made wedding dresses out of them. Not that people ever bought them or wore them, but they would hang from the ceiling and they were kind of big. And it just continued for me to kind of think about what are the layers of being a woman. So these pieces kind of deal with that, and they're intentional without arms or heads or legs or anything like that, because when I first think about going in a store, I can remember going in even as a teenager and looking and thinking, oh, those dresses are beautiful hanging on the rack, and they're flat and there's no person in them, and you can start thinking, I would look like this. I would wear that beautiful ball gown, or I'd wear that beautiful dress to a party, and I'd walk down the stairs and I would look like this. So I want them to be anonymous in that sense. I want people to be able to identify with them, and also not to be able to think about it's a particular age, it's a particular race, it's a particular person. So I'd like them to be anonymous that way. I have had people ask, well, why aren't there heads, or, is it just that you can't make them? And I've made doll molds. I've gone to the stores, bought doll heads, made my own plaster molds, and tried them on them, and I don't like them at all. And so now I have a closet full of like beheaded dolls. But they just don't give that same kind of feeling. And I also like the idea that they could, well, as I said, they could be what you want them to be. But there's also this image, I think, with them that it's intentional. Some time ago, I read a book by Margaret Atwood, and I'm going to misquote what she says, but it's in this genre. She said, I don't know if it was in Cat's Cradle or another book, she said, women grow up, and it's not so true anymore, but it was when I was growing up. They grow up, they take someone else's name, and they become anonymous. And I kind of wanted that. I've always kind of wanted that with the dresses as well. It's we don't know who that person is, and we don't know who a lot of people are throughout literature until Judy Chicago came along and gave us all that information, which was awesome. So that's kind of what these are about. And secondly, I just genuinely love surface things. I love to put color in things. I love to cut things out. So that's more of a process thing and less of the content thing. I like making molds. I like buying the plaster, figuring out how many part molds something is going to take to make. I like doing those kinds of things. So I love the process. And that's what all the little painting and detail is about them. So these are all mostly low fire earthenware clay with underglazes that are commercial, but I tend to mix them up a little bit with mason stains and some different things like that. And then this one I think is the only one in the exhibit that's got encaustic on it as well. So most of them are just straightforward coil built, hand built, low fire cone 04, 06, clay, a couple are stoneware, one's terracotta, just built up from coils and then fired. I like to do my underglazes on bisque completely. I don't like to do it on greenware very much. And that's pretty much the process. I like to have them in 2 parts just because they're easy to kind of manipulate, although my kiln will handle a dress that big, but I like them in 2 parts because they fit my car better. Practical reasons. And I think that's about it that I had to say about the
So yeah, now we're gonna ask you some of the questions that people submitted online. So the first is from Jenny. She's one of the studio artists here, actually. Yeah. So her question is, what is it about shoes that make you want to make so many types? Is there something important to you about shoes? I always say I spend more money on shoes because that's the only size of my body that doesn't change every year. Do our shoes say more than we think they do?
I do think they do. I do think they say more than we think they do, for a lot of different reasons. But the shoes, especially some that are not in this show right now, the high-heeled shoes, were just mainly because I wanted to work out some molds. I mean, and it seemed to me that the shoes would be the easiest way to do that. So I went to a thrift store, bought some shoes, made some molds of different ones. And in the ones that I think she might be talking about, their heels, the insoles all have different women's occupations on them that are kind of atypical. So the soles might have a construction worker. I have Ruth Bader Ginsburg soles in them. I have a President of the United States seal soles in them. So sometimes shoes do and don't say a lot about us, which is why I made those, because we go to work as women, and in politics as well. We are judged, we can be judged on our platform, but we're also very much judged on what we wore or what we look like on the stage more than men are. So I wanted to have this sort of fancy outside shoe with the real work on the inside of the sole. Other than that, I have some Converse, and she might be talking about those that were the same way. They're little playground shoes that have on the Converse, on the little seal on the Converse, they have different images of animals that have a bite, like a scorpion or some different things like that. Red ants, there's a red ant one. So, and then these rain boots I already mentioned, they were important to me to say, this is what I grew up with, someone saying, someday your prince will come. And may or may not, and it may not be a prince, so.
Is there a reason, like in that context, that you decided to do rain boots instead of, say, like Little Mary Jane's or something?
Yes, it's a very easy reason. I went to Target and looked at shoes and said, these look so much fun to cast, so I bought rain boots to cast.
Great. That's awesome. I love that. I mean, I also love the rain boots because, at least personally for me, and a lot of them have the illustrations of the children's books that you were talking about earlier, and I have such a vivid memory as a kid of putting on rain boots and you go out and play in the mud and you go out and splash around. And I know that in your in the exhibition statement you talked about how in those books that you would read as a kid, a lot of the times the girls were inside watching the boys outside getting to play. So I kind of love that it's it sort of represents that, but it could also represent to a singular person that their own memories of kind of doing the opposite of that,
Yes, and that's very much what are on them.
Yeah, that's great.
I also really love the connotation of like the Morton Salt Girl, when it rains it pours, and that's sort of, I have fond memories of being alone in rain boots as a little girl, and there is this sort of solitude, that is represented by rain boots.
That's kind of interesting because I have had some of my friends who maybe kind of like to dress me a little bit because this is typical it, I mean, this is as dressed up as I get, but they said, you have all these fashion dresses and you never ever dress like that. And it's true. I mean, I think it's a beautiful texture of quality and loveliness of detail that dresses can have, but they also put you in a place, as well.
They're restricting. I mean, you can't go backpacking in a dress necessarily, or one of these dresses.
Right.
Awesome. Well, our other question was from Janie H. Her question was, your work looks so fragile. How are you able to cut and draw on your dresses without breaking them?
It is fragile, and I've had them fall apart. I mean, this one has a lot, well, I don't know if you can see it on it's the birds. it has a lot cut into it, and it's just over time that I figured out the exact place for it to dry, that I can take an X-Acto knife to cut into it, that it doesn't go too far, that it's brittle. So that's an experience thing. But I also know that, I mean, and this is a little bit of technical, I guess. I mean, it's just a hit and miss. But so if I do this skirt part and I make the top, but I don't have it cut in, that's okay. You could go that far, but you can't start cutting in with the weight of, or I can't cut into it with the weight of this on top. So it makes it easy to have them in two pieces, and I can take it apart. I can cut all of this, because you can, I generally start at the bottom. I just cut this up this way, and it'll keep supporting, because it's typically vertical cuts, so it's not going to really fall apart. So
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's it for online questions. So, do you?
Well, I want to thank you so much for
Oh,
being part of,
I'm excited.
you know, coming here and making the drive up and giving us a chance to talk. I have a couple of questions. My background is craft, so I'm always really interested in that. And could you speak to a little bit about where you see craft with a capital C in contemporary art in 2021? Is that line just completely abolished these days?
You know, what's interesting to me is that well, I was at Red Lodge Clay Center last year, this time, as a short-term resident, and I felt like I was over in the corner making craft things while everybody else was doing these giant, 3-day wood fire things or whatever, and so at that place, I love Red Lodge. This is not anything bad about that, but I felt a little more like maybe I wasn't making art, although that was I put that on myself. That was no one else that was doing that. But if I look at other things, I see that that's not the case. I mean, it's all over the place. I think that just personally, I feel like that just distinguishing element is kind of gone, or more so. And well, I could say a lot more about that, but yeah, I think it's leveling out.
I think there's a real, especially because I think we all know that craft is sort of code for like traditionally women's mediums. Yeah, and I totally feel like, work like yours, or people, or like women, or who are doing, like really cool things with like textile art. I feel like that's becoming more and more integrated. Like I've seen, fibers and textile shows that have lots of embroidery or things like that much more in museums recently than I had in the
past.
Right,
and there's a opening up or meshing of gender with that too, which I think it was more isolating. Like women go over there and quietly make. I mean, if you look at the 1800s, they're all stuck in drawing rooms and embroidering. But I don't think that that's the case. I mean, I think it's a gender cross now, and it's very nice. Because I know a lot of guys, I won't mention them here, but that are contemporary ceramics people that are doing very delicate work, and it makes my heart happy.
I think just like there's so much more gender fluidity in the 21st century, and especially in the last couple decades. It's same with art and craft, and that that delineation, I guess, it's blurred. We're not even there anymore.
Right. And I feel like some of that has to do also with venues, that it's not just, you don't just have to go, which I love, but you don't just have to go to the Met to see art anymore. It's the venues are opening up in a more cohesive way, I think, too, which is great.
Where do you see, craft makers, artists, where do you see them in this age of the pandemic? And we'll be dealing with, say, masks for years to come probably, and this sort of social distancing and isolation. How has that affected you and in the broader umbrella of art?
Well, for me, it's been great, because I would rather just stay at home and work in my studio. It's in my home. It's a very lovely window out to the aspen trees. I mean, I'm happy to stay there all day and get up at 9, or well, I get up a little bit earlier, but start working at 9 till 6 and not even move away from that. And I see more people becoming more interested in that. That said, I do think it's hard to not be around other people. Like, this artwork center is a wonderful place. It's almost like it looks to me almost like a residency. You can see people, you can bounce ideas off of each other, and I miss that. I miss that a lot. And then on the other hand, yet another hand, I guess, I like that things are online and virtual, and I can go and see it. And there are things I know I wouldn't have seen because they wouldn't have done a virtual piece with it. So I don't know. I don't know.
That's great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much again.
Oh,
Brenda Jones.
my pleasure.
Yes, that was wonderful. We officially open on the 12th. So by the time this video is up, this will be open officially to the public, so everyone can come down and see it, and it'll be running through the end of March. So plenty of opportunity to come down, make a reservation for the 12th to come and for Night on the Town and in Loveland, Colorado. We are so blessed to have your work here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yay.
For sure.